Some kind of evil has been growing here for 40 years. A curse born from the crooked politics of this damn city. I've seen it in the corner of my eye and in my nightmares. This thing darkens the shadows and flickers just beyond the street lamps. It fumes and stalks below the sidewalk grates. It watches from the alleyway, from the darkened doorway, the abandoned storefront. I see it behind me in the mirror every morning I wake up and I'm still full of booze. I was back on the job again and working for a small-time agency in Chinatown. Cheating husbands, accountants on the take, background dossiers, runaway teenage girls, you know the type. All very small-time stuff. It kept my head busy and kept me away from the downtown crimes. All the dirty politics, white-collar grift, murder, and worse. I had been forgotten, and that was just fine with me. My part in the Jasper Hotel racket had slid far into the background. After my partner ate his gun, I became a harmless drunk, and the mayor's daughter went missing. And that was something I knew far too much about. Far too much. Yeah, I was a dirty cop and did whatever the chief wanted. It was supposed to be easy. Rough up the last tenants in the hotel, and the wretched losers would move on to an even worse part of town rather than try to fight the machine. Mayor Bland and Chief Haskell were lining their pockets with the developer's money, clearing out the neighborhood for the new high-rise. This would be jobs and middle-class housing, and a fresh new coat of paint on this stinking turd of a town. All those junkies and artists and prostitutes and freaks had to go. All the single mothers and ex-cons trying to get straight. The old folks with no families, the head cases with no friends, the have-nots too weak and too poor to grab that brass ring. Once the hotel was knocked down, they stuck up a shiny new building on the old foundations and moved in all the half-rich money grubbers, ladder climbers, and entrepreneurs they could find. And just like that, the neighborhood was gone. After 40 years, I had finally started to forget, and I was keen to get on with the latest assignment. A small, not important, not connected to the past crime that would get me my bread and butter. Figure out who or what was ripping the life out of Bootsy and Mr. Mittens and old Skippy at the new Jasper condos. There was still a contingent of city rats, even raccoons and feral street dogs bit on the pampered pets of the local upper crust. I thought I could just walk into the place and collect a fat check for flushing out some wild animal that was chewing on Fluffy and his furry friends. But that's not how things went. It was new, and it was not. The sheen of the new Jasper condominiums had begun to exhibit a vibration of the past. I stood in Mrs. Paul's apartment to see where poor Baxter lay with his smashed-up head on the kitchen floor. Mrs. Paul's kitchen is nice and neat and clean and modern, and there's Baxter laying in a pool of blood, his little head all a mess. I have to concentrate on the job, get it done, and get out of here. But there's something happening, something I can see behind my eyes that's not right, that's not now. For a moment I thought I saw her. But I shook it off. I had a job to do, and the past was the past. It was dead. It had to be. Margaret worked the old neighborhood as a nurse, tending the old folks and cripples and hookers. She was at the Jasper that night with old Mrs. Skenowitz, bringing her medicine for a weak heart when me and Dax busted up the place. Daxie had a heavy hand and cuffed Maggie one good when she started giving us some lip. I know he didn't mean to offer. She just fell that way. Fell into the stove and split her head open. Mrs. Skenowitz couldn't take the scene, Margaret laying dead like that. Mrs. S. tried to scream, but there was only a strangled sort of gasping. Just like that, her heart gave out. She too was dead. Only it's Margaret I can't take my eyes off of, bleeding out, laying there, quiet as a dead dove in a garbage can. All I had to do was find the master hideaway of whatever wild dog was down there. and then ring up the dog catcher. Hell, it would be cash for the rent and maybe even a few drinks, and drinks are always a good thing. Solve this little mystery of the mutilated house pets, get paid, and head to the bar. The super took me down to show me where all the other dead pets had been found. He didn't stick around. He was scared stiff. He tossed me the keys and a flashlight and legged it. But I could see in my mind's eye the interior of that cramped lift as it looked 40 years ago when Dax and I rode down to the basement. We rolled the two women up in blankets and hauled them into that damned elevator. There was the basement, and below that, the old subway station. The whole place would be sealed off once the building was demolished. We knew what we had to do. Hide the bodies in the deepest, darkest hole we could find. And so we went down into a kind of hell I've never really returned from. I found a trail of what looked like lizard scales. Maybe this pooch-killing thing is one of those pet alligators that got loose in the sewers. I follow the trail, and without knowing it, I find I'm back here in the subway, looking at the service hatch underneath the stairs. Dax found the hatch that night and opened it. The most foul stench burned our lungs and eyes. Daxy rolled in Mrs. S, and there was no sound. No thud, or bounce, or splash. No sound at all, like there was no bottom to the thing. I didn't like it. I didn't like any of it, but we had to go on. After the Jasper job, Daxy and I were put on a new case, the biggest case in town, and it was my last case as a copper. I never solved it. I couldn't. No one could. Margaret Bland, nurse of the poor and indigent of our great city, and daughter of our mayor, had gone missing. Been missing for 3 days. That night Dax blew his brains out, and that was the smart thing to do. I started drinking. Drank myself out of that job, drank myself nearly to the grave, but not quite. I'm too scared to really live, and even more frightened to die. I'm terrified of what I'll find on the other side of this so-called life. The hatch gaped open before us, and we each took an end of the rolled-up blanket containing the nurse, Maggie, and swung her over the darkness of the unholy void and let go. And this time, we did hear a sound just a moment later.